You've done everything right for 5 years straight. You've saved $50,000, more than 90% of Americans, and now you're about to quit. Not because you're failing, but because you've entered what wealth psychologists call the death zone, the invisible barrier between $50,000 and $100,000, where more financial dreams die than at any other point in the journey. There's a statistical anomaly in personal finance data that nobody talks about. When researchers track people's wealth-building trajectories, they find something bizarre. The dropout rate between $50,000 and $100,000 saved is higher than at any other wealth level. Higher than 0 to 10,000, higher than 10 to 25,000, even higher than the jump from 100,000 to 250,000. People who successfully save their first $50,000, people who have demonstrated years of discipline, people who understand compound interest, people who have built solid financial habits are quitting in droves before they hit 6 figures. And it makes no logical sense. This is the phase where compound interest starts accelerating, where your money finally starts making meaningful money, where the hardest part should theoretically be over. But the data is clear. Something about this specific range destroys motivation at an unprecedented rate. Financial advisors have a term for it borrowed from mountaineering. They call it the death zone. After the altitude on Mount Everest, where most climbers die not at the base, not at the peak, but in that brutal middle section where you're experienced enough to have made it this far, but exhausted enough that continuing feels impossible. The $50,000 to $100,000 range is your financial death zone. You're past the beginner phase. You've proven you can do this. You have real capital now. But instead of feeling wealthy, you feel more trapped than ever. The goals that motivated you for years suddenly feel pointless. The sacrifices that seemed worth it now feel crushing. And the finish line you thought was getting closer somehow keeps moving further away. This isn't a personal failing. This is a documented psychological phenomenon with specific triggers, predictable patterns, and most importantly, concrete solutions. Understanding why this death zone exists is the difference between joining the 95% who quit here and the 5% who break through to genuine wealth. Let's talk about what's really killing your KEEM, momentum, and how to survive this zone. Let's start with the most frustrating part of having $50,000 to $100,000 saved. Nobody can tell. And that invisibility is psychologically devastating in ways you probably don't realize. When you had $10,000, you could see it as a milestone. When you hit $25,000, you celebrated internally. But now you have $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, and your life looks exactly the same as it did when you had nothing. You're still driving the same car, still living in the same apartment, still wearing the same clothes, still working the same job, still saying no to the same things. The difference is that now you've been doing it for 5, 6, maybe 7 years. You've spent the better part of a decade sacrificing, saving, optimizing, and disciplining yourself. And externally, you have nothing to show for it. Your net worth is invisible. Your friends don't know. Your family doesn't see it. Your coworkers can't tell. The only people who know you have money are you and your bank. This creates a profound psychological crisis because humans need external validation. We're social creatures. We need others to recognize our achievements. It's not shallow, it's neurological. Our brains release dopamine when we receive social recognition, and that dopamine reinforces the behaviors that led to the recognition. But nobody recognizes your $50,000. You can't display it. You can't wear it. You can't post about it without looking like you're bragging or inviting judgment. So you've achieved something statistically rare. You're in the top 10% of American savers, but you get zero social reward for it. No recognition, no status, no validation. Compare this to other achievements. If you lose 50 pounds, people notice and compliment you. If you get promoted, people congratulate you. If you buy a new car, people comment on it. These achievements come with built-in social validation that reinforces the behavior and motivates you to continue. Your $50,000 comes with nothing. Worse than nothing, actually, because if people did know about it, they'd probably have opinions. They'd tell you you're being too conservative, or too aggressive, or that you should be investing differently, or that you should enjoy your life more. The few times you've mentioned your financial progress, you've gotten more criticism than celebration. So you stop talking about it. You keep it private, and in keeping it private, You lose the social reinforcement that makes difficult behaviors sustainable long-term. You're climbing a mountain in complete darkness with no one cheering you on, and you can't even see how far you've come. This invisibility trap is compounded by the fact that at this wealth level, you're still constrained in all the same ways you were before. You can't quit your job, you can't retire, you can't buy a house with cash, you can't fundamentally change your lifestyle. The money exists, but it doesn't create freedom. It just sits there, invisible and impotent, while you continue grinding through the same life you were living before you had it. Now let's talk about something that absolutely crushes people in this range: the illusion that your progress has slowed down, even though mathematically, it's actually accelerating. Think about your journey to $50,000. Let's say it took you 5 years. Your first $10,000 took maybe 18 months. Your second $10,000 took maybe 12 months. You were getting faster. Building momentum. Each milestone came quicker than the last. But now something weird happens. You're trying to get from $50,000 to $100,000. That's another $50,000. At your current savings rate of $10,000 per year, that's 5 more years. The same amount of time it took you to get from 0 to 50,000. Your brain interprets this as slowing down. You feel like you're back at square one, grinding toward a distant goal at the same pace you started with. The acceleration you felt from 0 to 50 has disappeared. You're in what feels like a plateau, saving the same amount every year with no sense that it's getting easier or faster. But here's what your brain is missing: compound interest. That $50,000 isn't sitting idle. If it's invested at 7% average annual returns, it's generating $3,500 per year in growth. Next year, it'll generate more. The year after, even more. By year 5, that original $50,000 will have grown to $70,000 without you adding a penny. So when you add your $10,000 per year savings plus the compound growth, you're actually accelerating. You'll hit $100,000 faster than you hit $50,000, not slower. But it doesn't feel that way because the acceleration is invisible. It's happening in the background of your portfolio, in the compounding that you can't see on a day-to-day basis. This is what I call velocity deception. Your actual velocity is increasing, but your perceived velocity is decreasing. And humans make decisions based on perceived reality, not actual reality. So even though you're moving faster than ever, you feel like you're slowing down, and that feeling kills motivation. The math gets even more dramatic as you continue. Getting from 100,000 to 200,000 will take less time than getting from 50 to 100 because you'll have more capital compounding. Getting from 200 to 400 will be even faster. This is the exponential curve of wealth building, but you can't feel it yet. You're still in the phase where it looks linear, and linear progress feels like failure when you've been at it for 5+ years. This velocity deception is compounded by lifestyle inflation pressure. As your income increases, which it likely has over these 5 years, your expenses want to increase proportionally. You're making more money, but you're still saving the same dollar amount. Maybe you're even saving the same percentage. So it feels like you're not progressing, even though you're actually maintaining discipline against increasing temptation. Now we need to talk about what happens to your social comparison at this wealth level, because this is where things get absolutely brutal. At $10,000, you were comparing yourself to other beginning savers. At $25,000, maybe you were comparing yourself to people who were a bit further along. But at $50,000, something catastrophic happens. You start comparing yourself to everyone, everywhere, all at once. You compare yourself to your college friends who bought houses. They don't have your net worth, they have massive mortgages, but they have the house. They have the backyard, they're hosting parties. They look successful. You look like you're still renting and not settled, even though your balance sheet is stronger than theirs. You compare yourself to your coworkers who are driving new cars and taking expensive vacations. They're probably in debt. You know this rationally. But they're living visibly better lives, while you're still driving your paid-off sedan from 2012. You compare yourself to people on social media who are your age and apparently killing it. They're starting businesses, buying rental properties, retiring early, building passive income. Your $50,000 looks pathetic next to their apparent success. You compare yourself to financial influencers who talk about their first $100,000 like it was easy. Just invest consistently and don't touch it, they say, as if they didn't struggle through the exact same death zone you're in now. They're posting from the other side of the wall you're trying to climb, having forgotten what the climb felt like. You compare yourself to older generations who could buy houses for $30,000 and had pensions. Your $50,000 would have been a fortune to them. To you, it's not even a down payment. You compare yourself to the statistical averages that say you should have way more saved by now. Articles telling you that by age 35 you should have 2 times your salary saved. If you're making $70,000 a year, that's $140,000. You're not there. You're failing by that metric, even though you're ahead of 90% of actual people. This is what I call comparison apocalypse. You're not just comparing yourself to one reference group, you're comparing yourself to every possible reference group simultaneously, and you're losing every comparison. Someone always has more, achieved it faster, started earlier, or made it look easier. The psychological term for this is omnidirectional social comparison, and it's uniquely painful. When you have one comparison that makes you feel inadequate, you can rationalize it. When you have 50 comparisons that all make you feel inadequate, rationalization breaks down. Your brain starts to believe that maybe you actually are behind. Maybe you actually are failing. Maybe this whole thing actually is pointless. And here's the cruelest part. The comparison apocalypse is enabled by your own financial education. You sought out financial content to learn and improve, but that content exposed you to everyone who's ahead of you. You joined communities to get advice, but those communities are full of people with more than you. You followed accounts for motivation, but those accounts show you what you don't have yet. The very actions you took to improve your financial situation are the ones that make you feel the worst about your financial situation. You educated yourself out of contentment and into anxiety. Let's talk about something that's deeply ironic about this wealth range. You have more financial freedom than you've ever had, but you feel less free than ever. With $50,000, you have options. You could take a year off work if you needed to. You could move to a new city. You could weather a job loss. You could start a business. You could go back to school. You could handle almost any emergency without going into debt. You have a freedom that most Americans will never experience. But you don't feel free. You feel trapped. Because every option you have comes with a cost. Spending down your net worth. And spending down your net worth means moving further away from your goals. So the freedom is theoretical, not practical. It exists, but you can't use it. This is the freedom paradox. The more money you accumulate, the less willing you are to spend it. Not because you're cheap, because the money represents too much sacrifice to use on anything other than your ultimate goals. That $50,000 isn't just money. It's 5 years of your life. 5 years of saying no. 5 years of discipline and delayed gratification. How could you possibly spend that on anything less than absolutely critical? So you become a prisoner of your own savings. You're theoretically free to make career changes, but you won't because it might reduce your savings rate. You're theoretically free to take risks, but you won't because what if you need that money later? You're theoretically free to enjoy life, but you won't because that would mean the sacrifices were for nothing. This paradox creates a bizarre situation where your quality of life might actually be worse than when you had less money. When you had $10,000, you'd spend $1,000 on a vacation without too much guilt. It was 10% of your net worth, but the absolute amount was small enough to justify. Now you have $50,000, and spending $5,000 on a vacation, the same 10% feels insane. That's half a year of saving. That's compound interest you'll never get back. That's moving your retirement date back by 3 months. The psychological research on this is clear. Beyond a certain point, accumulated wealth doesn't increase happiness unless you're willing to deploy it. And at $50,000 to $100,000, you're not willing to deploy it. You're in the worst possible psychological position. You have enough that you feel you should be happy, but not enough that you feel you can use it, so you end up just anxious. This freedom paradox is compounded by the fact that your window for certain experiences is closing. You're not 22 anymore. Your parents are getting older, your friends are having kids. Time-sensitive opportunities are passing while you accumulate money that you're too afraid to spend on creating the experiences that would make that accumulation worthwhile. Now, let's talk about something that becomes overwhelming at this level. You know too much, and that knowledge is paralyzing you. When you had $10,000, your financial decisions were simple. Should I save this? Yes. Where should I put it? High-yield savings account. Done. Your financial life was straightforward. At $50,000, nothing is straightforward anymore. Should this be in a taxable brokerage account, or a Roth IRA, or traditional IRA, or both? What's the optimal tax strategy? Should you be doing backdoor Roth conversions? What about a mega backdoor Roth? Should you prioritize tax-advantaged space or maintain flexibility? What about asset allocation? Stocks versus bonds? Domestic versus international? Large cap versus small cap? Value versus growth? Target date funds versus three-fund portfolio versus factor investing versus dividend growth? You've read the research. You know the arguments. You're paralyzed by options. What about real estate? Should some of this be a down payment? Are you missing out on appreciation and leverage? But what about the opportunity cost of not keeping it invested? What about the lack of diversification? What about geographic diversification? Tax loss harvesting? Rebalancing frequency? Expense ratios? Fund overlap? Correlation matrices? You know all these terms. You understand why they matter. And that understanding has made every financial decision exponentially more complex. This is the sophistication curse. The more you learn, the more possibilities you see. The more possibilities you see, the more potential mistakes you can make. The more potential mistakes you can make, the harder it becomes to make any decision at all. You've read conflicting advice from equally credible sources. Some experts say bonds are essential. Others say bonds are pointless at your age. Some say international diversification is critical. Others say it's unnecessary with U.S. total market funds. Some say real estate is the only path to real wealth. Others say it's an illiquid distraction from index investing. And because you're sophisticated enough to understand the nuances, you can see why each perspective has merit. You're not ignorant enough to just pick one approach and stick with it confidently. You're stuck in the middle, understanding multiple approaches, unable to commit fully to any of them. This paralysis has a real cost. While you're debating the optimal allocation, your money is sitting in a money market fund, earning 3%, instead of being invested earning 7%. That 4% difference on $50,000 is $2,000 per year in lost growth. Over 5 years, that's over $13,000 you're losing to analysis paralysis. The sophistication curse also manifests in portfolio tinkering. You're constantly tweaking your allocation, moving money around, trying to optimize, and all that activity introduces taxes, transaction costs, and behavioral mistakes that undermine your returns. You've become sophisticated enough to hurt yourself. Now we need to talk about something that absolutely kills motivation at this level. Each additional dollar you save has less visible impact than the one before. When you had $5,000 and saved $500, that was a 10% increase in your net worth. Visible, meaningful, exciting. When you had $10,000 and saved $500, that was 5%. Still significant. Now you have $50,000. You save $500 this month. That's 1%. It barely moves the needle. It doesn't even show up on the chart at the scale you're looking at. You worked hard for that $500 overtime, side hustle, spending discipline, and your net worth graph looks exactly the same as it did before you added it. This is what economists call diminishing marginal returns, but emotionally it feels like your efforts don't matter anymore. You're working just as hard, sacrificing just as much, but getting less psychological reward for the same effort. The math is even more brutal when you think about it in terms of goal progress. If your goal is $1 million, adding $500 is 0.05% progress. You need 2,000 more months like this one to reach your goal. That's 166 years. Your brain can't process that as meaningful progress. This diminishing marginal impact creates a motivation crisis. The same behaviors that got you from 0 to 50,000 don't feel worth it anymore when they're getting you from 50 to 100,000. Not because they're less effective, they're actually more effective thanks to compound interest, but because they're less psychologically rewarding. You start asking yourself if it's worth it to pick up that extra shift. It's $500, but that barely moves your net worth. Maybe you should just take the time off. You start questioning whether it's worth it to say no to that dinner invitation. It's $80 saved, but that's 0.16% of your net worth. Does it really matter? This is dangerous because it leads to lifestyle inflation and savings rate decay at exactly the wrong time. You're at the point where maintaining discipline would create exponential results, but your psychological reward system is telling you that discipline doesn't matter anymore. The diminishing marginal impact also makes market volatility more painful. When you had $10,000 and the market dropped 5%, you lost $500. That hurt, but it was abstract. Now you have $70,000 invested and the market drops 5%. You just lost $3,500. That's 3 months of saving gone in one day. You watch your net worth drop by more in 1 week than you can save in half a year. This creates what psychologists call loss aversion amplification. The losses feel massive. The gains feel incremental. Your brain is wired to weigh losses more heavily than equivalent gains. And at this wealth level, the losses are large enough to be psychologically devastating, while the gains are small enough to feel meaningless. Let's talk about something that happens around the 50 to 70,000 mark that's absolutely critical. Your original goals stop making sense, and you don't have new ones yet. When you started saving, you had a clear goal. Maybe it was save $10,000 for an emergency fund. Clear, concrete, achievable. You hit that. Then maybe it was save $25,000. You hit that too. Maybe then it was save $50,000. Done. But now what? Your original goals were small enough to be concrete. $50,000 is abstract. What happens now is that people make one of two mistakes. Either they don't set a new goal and just drift, or they set a goal that's too big to be motivating. The first mistake, drifting, is common. You hit $50,000 and think, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. But humans need targets. Without a specific goal, your behavior becomes inconsistent. You save some months and don't others. You lose the discipline that got you here because there's no specific finish line to push toward. The second mistake, setting an overwhelming goal, is even more common. You think, okay, now I need to get to $1 million. That's 20 times what you have now. It's going to take 15 more years at your current pace. Your brain can't stay motivated for 15 years. That goal is too distant to create behavioral change today. This is goal dissolution. Your old goals don't apply anymore, and your new goals aren't functional yet. You're in a motivational void where you're just going through motions without a clear target. This is compounded by the fact that your goals are probably changing as you age and your life circumstances evolve. When you started saving in your 20s, retirement was abstract. Now you're in your 30s and retirement is still 30 years away, but it's less abstract. Maybe you're starting to think about kids, or buying a house, or aging parents. Your financial goals are fracturing from one clear target into multiple competing priorities. Should you prioritize retirement savings, house down payment, kids' education, aging parent care, career transition fund? Each goal is legitimate. Each goal requires significant capital. And your $50,000 isn't enough to make meaningful progress on any of them, let alone all of them. So you freeze. You don't know which goal to prioritize, so you don't make progress on any of them with intentionality. Your money just accumulates in generic accounts without a specific purpose, and money without purpose doesn't create motivation. Now, let's talk about something that people don't discuss enough. At this wealth level, you're socially isolated in your financial journey, and that isolation is quietly destroying you. You can't talk to your broke friends about money because they can't relate and they resent your problems. When you mention you're trying to figure out your asset allocation, they roll their eyes. When you say you're stressed about whether to max your 401k, they tell you you're humble bragging. They're struggling to make rent, and you're talking about tax-advantaged accounts. You've become the out-of-touch friend. You can't talk to your successful friends about money because you're embarrassed. They're buying houses, starting businesses, talking about their rental portfolios. Your $50,000 is their quarterly investment. You feel like you're playing a different game entirely, and you're losing. You can't talk to your family about money because they either don't understand or they have expectations. Your parents might think $50,000 means you're rich and should help them financially. Or they might think $50,000 is nothing and you're not doing well enough. Either way, the conversation is fraught. You can't talk to your partner about money if you're single. It's awkward to bring up in dating. If you're coupled, there's either income disparity creating tension, or you're both stressed and don't want to make it worse by constantly discussing finances. You can't talk to your coworkers about money because it's unprofessional and could create workplace politics issues. So you're completely alone in this journey. You're making the biggest financial decisions of your life in isolation, with no one to brainstorm with, no one to validate your concerns, no one to celebrate your progress with, and no one to catch you when you're about to make a mistake. This social isolation has devastating psychological effects. Humans are social animals. We process complex problems through conversation. We stay motivated through shared struggle. We validate our choices through peer confirmation. When you're isolated, you lose all of that. You're in your own head, spiraling through doubts and questions, with no external perspective to ground you. The isolation also means you're vulnerable to predatory advice. Because you can't talk to real people, you're getting your financial advice from strangers on the internet. Some of it is good, some of it is terrible, but you have no way to evaluate which is which because you don't have trusted advisors or knowledgeable friends to sense-check things with. This isolation is why so many people in this wealth range make catastrophic mistakes. They get into cryptocurrency because an influencer made it sound good. They buy a rental property they can't afford because a guru said real estate is the only path. They stop saving because a lifestyle blogger said you should enjoy your youth. With no social support network to reality check these ideas, they're vulnerable to whatever sounds convincing in the moment. So after all of this analysis, how do you actually survive the death zone? How do you get from 50,000 to 100,000 without quitting? First, you need to fundamentally reframe what this phase is. This isn't a plateau. This is the compounding amplification phase. This is where your years of discipline start paying exponential dividends. The next 50,000 will come faster than the last 50,000, even if it doesn't feel that way. To make this real, create what I call a compound visibility system. Build a spreadsheet that shows not just your net worth, but specifically how much of your net worth came from contributions versus growth. Watch that growth number increase month by month. That's compound interest becoming visible. That's proof that your money is starting to work for you. Split your net worth tracking into two charts, one showing absolute dollars, one showing percent growth. The absolute dollars chart will look linear and demotivating. The percent growth chart will show acceleration and prove you're speeding up, not slowing down. Second, you need to create micro milestones that are achievable in 90-day periods. Not get to 100,000 that's years away. Instead, increase net worth by $5,000 this quarter, or achieve 3 months in a row of 10% savings rate, or fully fund Roth IRA by end of quarter. These 90-day goals create frequent wins. Frequent wins create dopamine. Dopamine sustains behavior. You need wins every quarter, not every 5 years. Third, you need to solve the invisibility problem by creating intentional visibility for yourself. This doesn't mean posting your net worth on social media. It means creating a physical representation of your progress that you can see daily. Some people create a chart on their wall. Some people have a savings tracker. Some people create a vision board with their $100,000 goal. The specific method matters less than having something tangible and visible that reminds you daily of your progress and your target. Fourth, you need to give yourself permission to spend on quality of life improvements that are genuinely high ROI. Take 2 to 3% of your net worth, that's $1,000 to $2,000 at 50,000, and spend it annually on things that meaningfully improve your daily life. This might be a better mattress, so you sleep better, a nicer desk chair since you work from home, a gym membership that you'll actually use, therapy to process the stress, a vacation with friends to maintain relationships. These aren't frivolous expenses, they're investments in your sustainability and your earning potential. Fifth, you need to shift from wealth accumulation to wealth optimization. Up until now, you've been focused on saving more. At 50,000, you need to start focusing on earning more and optimizing what you have. This means negotiating a higher salary, switching jobs for a 20% raise, starting a side business, developing skills that increase your market value. A $10,000 raise has more impact than saving an extra $1,000. Focus your energy where the leverage is highest. For optimization, if you're not already doing so, make sure every dollar is deployed optimally. 50,000 in a checking account earning 0.1% is malpractice. That money should be working. Tax-advantaged accounts maximized. Appropriate asset allocation for your goals and timeline. Low-cost index funds. Automatic rebalancing. Make your money work as hard as you did to earn it. Sixth, you need to find your financial community. Not people to brag to or compete with, people who are in the exact same position you're in, struggling through the exact same phase, asking the exact same questions. Online forums can work. Local meetup groups can work. Even one friend who's financially minded and in a similar situation can work. You need someone to talk to about asset allocation without judgment. Someone to celebrate when you hit 60,000. Someone to commiserate with when the market drops. Someone to reality check your decisions before you make them. Seventh, you need to make peace with the timeline and stop treating this as a sprint. Wealth building is a marathon. You're not behind, you're right where you should be. The anxiety you feel isn't evidence of failure, it's evidence that you're in the hard part where most people quit. The people who make it through aren't more disciplined than you. They're not smarter, they're not luckier. They just refused to quit when it felt pointless. That's it. That's the entire difference. The death zone between $50,000 and $100,000 is real. It's documented, and it's brutal. But it's not insurmountable. Every single person who has built significant wealth went through this exact phase. They felt this exact way. They questioned if it was worth it. They wanted to quit. The ones who succeeded aren't superhuman. They just understood that this discomfort is temporary and necessary. They knew that the psychological pain they felt wasn't evidence that they were failing, it was evidence that they were about to break through. You have $50,000. That's not nothing. That's more than most people will ever save. That's enough capital that compound interest can start creating real wealth. That's enough to prove you can do this. The question isn't whether you'll struggle through the death zone. Everyone struggles through it. The question is whether you'll recognize the struggle for what it is, a predictable, temporary phase that you can push through, or whether you'll interpret it as evidence that this whole thing was a mistake. You're not stuck, you're not failing, you're not behind, you're in the death zone, and the only way out is through.